Hello, true duelists. It's YGO Strat's Yu-Gi-Oh! Single card history, where I'm going to be talking about some of the cards that have impacted Yu-Gi-Oh! throughout the years, and some of the other ones that didn't. Today's card, the terror of the damage step since 2008, Honest. Honest was first released in Light of Destruction as a secret rare in 2008, the cover card of the set, and also one of the nicest ghost rares there is from that very same set. It would get an ultra rare print in 2010's Twilight Edition, a lovely chaos product for its time, and got the coveted Peasant rare printing in the Lost Sanctuary structure deck in 2011. It also received a gold rare print in 2014's Premium Gold set, an ugly as shit Sin rare in the Noble Knights of the Round Table box set that I want to forget exists, and it got a super rare printing in 2017's Spirit Warriors. This is another card that's been around the ban list, being first semi-limited on the March 2010 ban list, and then limited a year later in March of 2011. It would stay limited until the January 2015 ban list would put it back up to semi-limited status, and finally it was unlimited again on the September 2017 ban list, where it has been ever since as I make this video. A level 4 light attribute fairy type monster with 1100 attack and 1900 defense, its effect reads: during the main phase, you can return this face-up card from your field to the hand. During the damage step, when a light monster you control battles, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. That monster gains attack equal to the attack of the opponent's monster it is battling until the end of this turn. If I'm being honest, this joke fucking sucks. I was gonna take that out of the script, but nah, fuck it, don't let him cook, make him deal with the consequences, gotta get the obvious one out of the way. Perfect. Out of the gate, Honest had a very obvious and very good home in the deck that is known as Lightsworn. Being the cover card of the set that brought Lightsworns into the game, couldn't have made it a more obvious pick of support for the deck. At the time Light of Destruction dropped, the game was in a very dark place, quite literally. Considered to be the first Tier 0 format run by the one and only Dark Armed Dragon, Dark decks had been the main threat since the release of Phantom Darkness before it, and a light counterpart to the meta was seen as a very welcome change by some. So with new toys, it should come as no shock that there was a new deck getting top spots with the newest Battle Trap. Lightsworn came out swinging with its debut, from spell and trap removal in the form of Lila, reviving from the grave with ease thanks to Lumina, easy swarming with Wolf, and a hell of a win condition that was Judgment Dragon, able to be summoned from your hand by having 4 different named Lightsworns in the grave, something enabled by every main deck monster Lightsworn except for Wolf having a mill effect during the end phase. And JD could just pay 1,000 to destroy every other card on the field. Neither the effect nor the summon was once per turn of any sort, so getting 4 names and dropping a dragon to blow up the field and then summoning more for a minimum of 6k damage was not only doable but pretty enjoyable for those doing it. Honest was an easy fit into the deck, able to turn the weaker Luminas or Errands into threats to be attacked into, and to really push for damage when swinging with something like Celestia or Wolf. It was also especially notable for the meta of the time due to the prominence of a deck like Gladiator Beast, a deck who needed its monsters to battle to get the positive effects, doesn't really get to have those positive effects when any given light monster could destroy their monsters in battle. Playing a pure variant of Lightsworn was generally the most successful at first, although it's worth noting that Twilight would become another popular deck in its time, adding a number of powerful dark monsters such as Gores, Necrogardna, and of course Plague Spreader for synchro plays allowed the deck more strength and more defensive options than Necrogardna particularly, while also enabling the deck access to things like Chaos Sorcerer, which is never a bad thing to have. Even in this sort of build, Honest remained a 3-of, due to the shadow it had over the battle phase, as well as its ability to simply help steal games. From this point, it remains a staple of light decks broadly speaking. Even as Synchros and Xyz monsters were introduced into the game, it really only gave decks more light monsters to abuse Honest. Agents were a popular deck made very playable by their structure deck's wide availability, which also allowed everyone to get a cheaper copy of Honest to play with thanks to its common reprint. Similar to Lightsworn before this one, Agents were exclusively a light attribute deck, but they often teched in dark monsters to help get the most out of chaos cards, most notably then the recently unbanned BLS Envoy of the Beginning. Honest had been limited by the time the structure deck released here in the TCG, but it was a staple all the same. Whether protecting a copy of Earth on field to ensure that you have a tuner for the 3rd turn of the duel, or of course the absolute disrespect of losing to an attack position Shine Ball, its potential to turn the tide of a game out of nowhere wasn't something that could just be ignored. It was also deadly when comboed with BLS, because BLS's ability to attack twice can make for some seriously high damage when you gain the attack of the monster you destroyed first and then swinging in direct with it, since Honest's attack buff lasts until the end of the turn. This same sort of strategy would also see Chaos decks make something of a return by simply playing the best light and dark monsters, and Honest was absolutely one of them at the time. Even into the Xyz era, a deck like the Hunter family, which was never anything beyond a regional level deck, would play it because it had easy access to rank 4s, and of particular note, Shockmaster is indeed a light monster, for whatever that that's worth. And all their key main deck monsters were lights, which meant the entire deck, again, could represent some shenanigans in the battle phase. Constellar similarly was a popular deck, although one that did see some success at more of a YCS level. Honest was a staple here as well, and I personally remember feeling very good if I could make a copy of Constellar Omega to pair with Honest, as it could clear the opponent's monster in battle without even having to fear their spell or trap due to its own effect. Was that insane? No, but it felt strong to me. And of course, with these two Xyz decks, Honest being level 4 was an extra little touch, allowing it to be used as an Xyz material in the worst of scenarios. And you know what else felt more powerful than it should have at the time? A deck named Bujin. The oddity of a meta threat, and really a showcase for how strong cards like Vanity's Emptiness and Kaiser Coliseum in particular are, Bujin was a deck that relied on keeping their key card Yamato on the field and would protect it at all costs. The other Bujin monsters had effects to protect Bujin Beast Warriors on the field in some way, or to help break board so long as you had one of those Bujin Beast Warriors. Things like Hair to protect from destruction and Turtle protect from targeting. The standard play was to normal Yamato, use its effect to add a Bujin monster from the deck to the hand, and then send one Bujin card from your hand to the grave, often ending by sending either Turtle or Hair to the grave. And the choice of do I wish to have targeting protection or destruction protection was about as much thought as Bujin players were capable of putting into a duel, or at least that's how people at the time felt, because this deck was incredibly annoying to face. And it wasn't just the grave effects. Bujin Crane was a staple battle trap for the deck, similar to Honest, able to discard it to double the attack of one of your Beast Warriors. It was another way to keep your Yamato safe, this time in battle, and players hated it as much as everything else. Bujin would run what felt like 4 copies of Honest, with the 3 copies of Crane and the lone Honest. And if they chose to do so, they could absolutely steal the game by combining them, provided, they skill opened that Honest. Using 2 Crane was useless because it just doubles the original attack, but stacking Honest and Crane meant that you would double the attack and then gain the attack of the opponent's monster, meaning you were hitting for 3,600 damage, which is only a little bit shy of the, half of the opponent's life points. Not something you want to fuck around with. And then when that was done with their Xyz, Susawano, instead of Yamato, you got that attack boost on a monster that could attack all monsters the opponent controls once each, which meant that if Vanity's Emptiness and Kaiser Coliseum Turbo Dot decks skill opened the one of Honest, they could OTK you as well for no reason. It was a very strong deck, and one that people were very glad to see power crept into oblivion. After this, it falls out of the limelight for some time, with modern Lightsworn decks of that era teching it in from time to time as their deck evolved, most notably into Lightsworn Rulers, which was a Lightsworn deck that could search its copies of Judgment Dragon with the effect of Eclipse Wyvern, and was such an OTK machine that it didn't really need Honest, although some players decided to play it regardless, I guess for nostalgia. Similarly, in Duelist Alliance format, some Teller players would tech Honest in, because few people would expect it, and since the Teller monsters don't really get much stronger than 2,500, and as such, a battle trick to help clear bigger beaters wasn't a terrible thing to have. To no shock, some Shadal players would try it out as well, because maybe it made your light engine of choice stronger, or maybe it was just a light material for construct that you didn't really hate to see in your hand. But either way, it could come up. Honest wasn't prominent in either of these decks, much more of an odd tech to help get a top or 2 here or there, but it's worth noting, I'd think. The next real home for Honest would ultimately come in Cosmo, the then new TCG exclusive deck of 2015. Cosmo's out of the gate had OTK potential through the roof, thanks to the abundance of psychic monsters who could quick effect banish themselves to summon a higher level Cosmo monster, and because Cosmo Farm Girl getting in damage could be lethal by itself. And it was very common in Cosmo, particularly in the first wave, to include Honest, because between Farm Girl and Emergency Teleport, getting access to Farm Girl wasn't a problem, and getting damage meant that you were fully off to the races. As had been the case in so many decks prior, this also meant that you could leave a face-up Farm Girl in attack position, and if the opponent was arrogant enough to attack it, you could destroy their monster and fully get your engine going for free. Honest would fall out of the deck as it got more support, most notably Dark Destroyer in its second wave, but in those few months between Clash of Rebellions and Dimensions of Chaos, it was a pretty wild time to be seeing battle traps in Cosmo decks. After that, it was quite some time before it would show up again, not really showing up in competitive play at all up until the release of Trickstars in 2017 and in 2018. Honest was a pseudo-staple of the deck, giving it some much-needed punch, and as always, threatening the battle phase regardless of who was attacking. Honest could be used to help out an opponent's masterpiece if the Draco player that they were facing against didn't have a copy of Draconic Diagram up. This was also notable because it could help steal a game when coupled with the relentless burning strategy that the deck was known for. Cards like Lycoris could deal 200 damage each time a card was added to the opponent's hand. Light Stage would burn for another 200 damage on top of that, and when you had, say, 2 copies of Lycoris on the field and you got reincarnationed for 6, you were legally allowed to tell your opponent to go fuck themselves because Trickstar was just annoying like that. And broadly, that's how a lot of people felt about Honest in general. Can you fuck off with that unexpected death of my monster in battle, please? It is an interesting hand trap. It kind of feels like more of a traditional trap than a hand trap in a way. Like, I can see Honest's effect being printed in pink as a card you activate on your field, but I don't really want to know what Nibiru's pink text would look like. I just know it'd be ugly. Where the pink cards do have to be set though, Honest is in the hand, and in the majority of cases, the opponent won't have any clue that it's coming. They can only guess that it might be coming if they're battling a light monster. It's an extra layer of mind games in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where the existence of a face-up light monster on the field can disincentivize attacking and really test the tempo of the game and change it in the opponent's favor. And it's not a video about Honest without going over the damage step, because Honest is a monster that affects the attack stat of a monster, meaning in the damage step you can get real with your opponent. And by real I mean be honest. You can use this card. The damage step is composed of 5 sub-steps of sorts, of which Honest can be used in some amount of them depending on which era of Yu-Gi-Oh! It is you're playing in, or at least as far as I've been able to find, that's the case. In the current modern version of Yu-Gi-Oh!, as I'm making this video in 2023, Honest can be used in 2 stages of the damage step, namely at the start of the damage step and before damage calculation. But if you're playing this card in the oh-so-popular Edison format, or a similar one from about before 2015 or so I believe it is, Honest works a little bit differently, because it can also be used during damage calculation in those formats, whereas that is not the case in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! This really only comes up in regards to situations where both players are using effects with attack modifying properties, and more accurately / importantly, it really only matters if you find yourself in a situation where both you and your opponent have an Honest to use to boost your monster's attack and try to win a battle. In the conventional sense, the first player to use Honest in a chain will win, because the chain always resolves backwards, and so if you attack your opponent and drop Honest, and they chain their Honest, when all is said and done, their monster will gain your monster's current attack, and then your monster will gain their boosted attack, and your monster will win. But it's not always so easy, since as stated, Honest can be used in 2 or 3 separate points of that time during the battle. In modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, you will go into battle when attack is declared. At the start of the damage step, the turn player will have the first opportunity to use the effect of Honest. If they choose not to, priority will then pass to the opponent to use their Honest. If the opponent also chooses not to use their Honest at this stage, then both players will have moved into before damage calculation and the last chance to use Honest in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Again, the turn player will have the first opportunity to use Honest. If they choose not to, priority will pass to the opponent, and again, if neither player uses it, then you'll proceed to damage calculation and move on from there. But if the turn player were to use their first chance to drop Honest in the before damage calculation step, the opponent can choose to let that chain resolve, and then on a new chain, drop their Honest at that point, and it will then gain the attack of the boosted opponent's monster and win the battle. Conversely, if it's before damage calculation and the turn player passes on their first chance to use Honest, the opponent could use their Honest after that. After that point, once the chain resolves, priority will pass back to the turn player, offering them a chance to drop their Honest again, and on a new chain, so it won't be stacked up. After that point, priority will pass again back to the opposing player, where if they choose to, they could then activate their Honest then on another new chain. The end result of this is that if both players are aware of how to properly use Honest, the player that will need Honest to resolve in order for it to win, i.e. the player with the lower attack monster, is always going to unfortunately lose, since if they always pass the priority, then the opponent will never need to use Honest, and conversely, if they at any point use Honest, the opponent can just say, okay, I let the chain resolve, and now on a new chain, I will use my Honest. So sucks to suck, but if the opponent knows how to play the game, you will lose that battle. Meanwhile, if you're playing an Edison, you can both choose to pass over activating Honest in before damage calculation and head into damage calc. At this point, things work a little bit differently, because only one single chain is allowed to be built in this sub-step, meaning that the turn player will get the first chance to drop Honest, and there will be no way for the opponent to wait for a subsequent chain. If they would use Honest, it will have to be chained to the turn player's Honest, in which case, again, the chain resolves back backwards, and the turn player monster will gain the attack of the opponent's boosted monster and win the battle. Also, if the turn player is stupid, goes into damage calc, says, I won't use it, and then the opponent does, and then the turn player chains, the turn player will use in that case. And again, neither player will have the opportunity to wait for the chain to resolve and then activate on a new chain like you can in the start of the damage step and the before damage calculation step. God, this card is confusing. Isn't this fun? Don't you like getting out the law degrees to figure this out? I might not be 100% on all of this, but this is as I've had it explained to me and as I understand it, so please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I should also go over the bounce to hand effect because it's kind of funny. Obviously it's good because you can get an Honest back into your hand if you were to ever say revive it. Bring it back with Call of the Haunted or Monster Reborn, bounce it to your hand, and now your light monsters have a little extra oomph for it. There's Big Dumb Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, or what the kids would call a simplified game state, where it can be really funny to summon Honest, attack for 1100, and then bounce it to the hand in main phase 2. This, either way you go about it, bouncing it to the hand does ruin the mind game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That Honest is most known for bringing, but it's even funnier if you have a second one and then you can really surprise the opponent. Still, it's not the end of the world, and it is a cute extra little bit of self-synergy, if you will. Overall, Honest is one of the earliest and certainly most memorable hand traps in the game. Its existence was enough to put fear in players' hearts, not unlike Gore's did as well, with an unsuspecting light monster backed by a full hand being a threat not unlike Gore's was. There's probably some fine irony that the card named Honest could steal games as easily as it did, and Lord have mercy on you if you have ever had Honest dropped on you more than once in the same battle, because of course, this effect is not a once per turn. A good old-fashioned battle trap, while its time in the light may have come and gone, if Trickstar is anything to go by, all it takes is another competent control style deck with light monsters for this card to probably show up again, because at the end of the day, there's really no satisfaction in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like hitting for a big number, and that's really what Honest is here for. And so that's our look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Single card history, Honest. Stay tuned for our next video, and feel free to suggest some cards to review or what type of video you'd like to see. Don't forget to like, and as always, subscribe to YGO Strats to impress your smokin' Italian wife, and most of all so you too can be a true duelist.